Hey everybody, I've already done a very long 45-minute video where I talked all about off-grid communications and radios, and I really kind of dove deep into how I've approached GMRS radio for, preparedness, self-reliance minded family. And at the time, I hadn't quite finished building out this GMRS Manpack. There's not a ton of content on YouTube about GMRS Manpacks. Most people they look at this from a hobby perspective. They'll get some HTs, they'll maybe get a radio in their vehicle, maybe one in their house. But when you start adding requirements like I want it to be mobile and you want to do really weird things like be able to act as a repeater in a backpack, you kind of push yourself into a realm where there's just not a ton of content. There's not a lot of people that I've been able to find that have done something like this. So I thought I would take and talk more specifically about what I built, why I built it, how I built it, and if this resonates with any of y'all out there and y'all think to yourselves, like that makes sense for my use, then hopefully I give you enough information that I can point you in the direction you need to go to try to put something like this together. But let me reposition the camera and we'll start talking about what's inside the bag. All right, so I'm like just over here, just off camera, because this is really what y'all probably want to see more of, and y'all really want to look at me because I'm not that interesting, but this might be. So to start with, like I've already talked previously in the other video I referenced about what my reasons for wanting to build a GMRS Manpack was. I didn't get super deep into how I built it. So let's start with radio choice. This is a Wuxin KG1000G Plus. I think at this stage of all the available GMRS 50-watt mobiles that are out there, I think this is the radio to beat. It has the best feature set. It does command one of the higher prices, but I mean, it's kind of pay to play at the end of the game. And quite frankly, if you wanted to build something similar to this for less money, there are corners you could cut, the radio being one of them. You could drop down something like a 20-watt mobile, and you would have most of the capability I have in this for a lot less money, because the big selling point here is that it's a super heterodyne radio, so it's basically two radios in one chassis, and you also have the ability to transmit at 50 watts, which I don't use super often because the more power you put out, the more battery you need, and so on and so forth. So a 20-watt mobile wouldn't cost you a lot of capability relative to this, but I also kind of got into buy once, cry once mode, which was I don't want to build something and then 6 months later I'm starting to regret not having the additional capabilities, so I went ahead and did it. What is surrounding this radio is a set of frames by Armoloq, Armoloq. This is becoming a very common sight in the Manpack world. They make a lot of different models for ham radios. They make a few different ones for GMRS. This is here to add some protection for the radio, some standoff on the top and the bottom, some cable management options, and relocation for the antennas. So like, you could certainly put together something like this yourself. You could also put together like a radio go box and not have this all in a pack like this. Those are other options. Again, it's just kind of the form factor you want. What I like about a Manpack being in a backpack is that I can put it on my shoulder, I can lug it to wherever I want to go with it, and I can deploy it out of the pack versus just having it in a box. It's just a different form factor. But the key here is that this gives you protection for your radio, because these radios were not originally built to be shoved into a backpack. And things like buttons and knobs and faceplates could get pretty severely goofed up if you just threw this loose into a bag. With the Armoloq kit came the pieces I needed to relocate or to adapt from an SO239 to a BNC connector and relocate up towards the top of the radio. That gives me the ability to plug an antenna directly into the top if I'm just leaving this in the pack. This is an HYS branded GMRS antenna I got off of Amazon. It does the job. I'll get a little bit more into this and the other antenna in just a second, but I discovered some interesting things about this when I started doing testing with a Surecom SW102 to look at the SWR of these antennas and try to figure out which one was better at which, and I came back with some interesting data from that. but this gives me the ability to use something that's small, short, if I'm operating at the lower power levels, and not to have to take the time to string up a bigger antenna up into a tree or deploy a mast. If I just want to stab and go, this works. This gets me in the game. The one thing that is worth pointing out, and just because I know somebody will ask, this is literally just a little mini Pelican case. I keep fuses and spare hardware and stuff like that in it. It's nothing intrinsic to the radio. It just kind of makes this fit into my pack better, and it gives me some onboard storage for things I don't want to leave without. Because I like to have, if something here goes down, I like to have the things necessary to fix it on the spot. So that's what all that is. The other thing you'll notice is this. So this is this is an Anderson power pole mount by Armoloq that connects to the M-lock that's built into these rails, and it just gives me a nice convenient place to mount these 30 amp power poles, which is what I've used for the radio connection, for the battery connection, the extra cables I built to harvest power from alligator clips or from a cigarette lighter plug. They all use Anderson connectors. My charger uses Anderson connectors. And it's really just the intent to like standardize that connector so that all these pieces can kind of float in and out as needed. Put this on the floor and drag the next thing over. So this is a Nermak lithium iron phosphate battery I got off of Amazon. I've had some mixed results out of it so far. It transmits up 20 watts just fine. When I put the radio up to 50 watts of transmitting power, sometimes this BMS gets a little grumpy and will shut off. I haven't honestly figured out yet what seems to be the issue, because sometimes it works perfectly fine and sometimes it doesn't. But what's, I think, important to point out here is that like these leads I made myself. I do recommend you fuse as close as humanly possible to your positive battery terminal. That's just standard good practice from the DC power world. I also have a fuse on the radio side just because if something's going to pop, I want it to be a fuse and not a $400 radio or a battery that I kind of need to work. This whip just passes through from one compartment in the bag to another through a hole I cut with a pocket knife. It doesn't have to be anything fancy here. I do recommend that you follow some basic principles like, you know, wrap your connections and fuse them appropriately and just do things smart. Also, I took and built this out of a sheet of ABS. Obviously, you can tell it was kind of rough and quick, but this is literally just here as a standoff to protect these two battery terminals, so that when this is sitting in the pack and I have things on top of it for storage, they can't get directly to the terminals. It's just another little layer of safety. I could have built a whole battery box if I really needed to, but to be frank, like the compartment this sits in is already so tight, nothing can get around the top of this down into here. So as long as I have a base for it to sit on and the terminals are protected, this works perfectly fine. And you could do something like this out of any non-conductive material. I use ABS because I used to be in a car audio lot. We use it for a lot of things in there, and it's very easy to work. 20 amp hour battery is what I deem necessary for my needs. You could go down to a 10 amp hour, save some money, and have a lot less weight. You could go bigger, but just understand that bigger means more transmitting time, bigger means more weight. Smaller is the opposite. So like, you know, make a decision based on that. The thing I can tell you is that I know that my radio draws out at 20 watts of transmitting power, it draws out about 6 watts, give or take. And when it's receiving, it's about a half a watt. So you could start to make some generalizations about how long you can operate the radio based on transmit half the time and receive half the time. That number of amps divided by your number of amp hours of the battery divided by that many amps. That lets you do the rough math. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to at least help you make some judgments about how big of a battery you need. Now, we already talked about this little whip antenna a second ago, and what I discovered when I was measuring the SWR of this antenna on this particular rig was that this antenna, again, HYS brand from Amazon, seems really, really good SWR-wise. It's a good match for the lower simplex channels, so channels 1 through 7 in GMRS. That had a near 1 SWR. So that indicates to me that this antenna is very well tuned for those channels that are down at about 462 hertz, or yeah, 462 megahertz. Now, the only problem I have is that this, being a little whip antenna, has no gain, and since it connects directly to the radio, it's going to be at ground level. And I was trying to have an option that gave me more range than that. So what I wound up getting was an N9TAX roll-up Slim Jim. Now this has 16 feet of cable. Please don't make me unwind this whole thing. It's kind of a pain in the butt to get it wrapped back up in this nice neat little roll so it'll fit into my pack. But to deploy it, it's literally just pull this strap, unwind the whole thing, connect this either to a throw bag and throw it over the limb of a tree, or connect this to a 40-foot spider beam mast that I have and hoist this up into the air. This has a little bit of gain compared to the HYS branded whip, and it gives me a lot more elevation. The thing I discovered was when I started looking at the SWR was that this is really a happy camper transmitting at 467 megahertz, which is so within GMRS, for those not aware, when you go to the repeater channels, you transmit at 467 megahertz. You receive at 462, 5 megahertz different. This is almost perfectly tuned to transmit at 467, and receiving at 462 isn't as critical. And that's perfect if your goal is to hit repeaters. This is a pretty affordable, very good option. It's well tuned for that. It's not as happy at the 462 megahertz frequencies, which is where your simplex action is taking place at. It's not awful, but it's obviously not as good as this at the simplex frequencies. So what I was left with was at the lower channels, when I'm on 1 through 7 or 15 through 22, I'm transmitting at 20 watts or less at 462 megahertz. This really works really, really well. And this roll-up Slim Jim is really more in its stride, trying to access repeaters. But then the next part of this project kind of made both of these less than optimal, and that was this. So I said when I started out this little video that one of my goals was to be able to make this repeater behave like a Manpack, or like a Manpack repeater. Not just a radio in a bag, but the ability to stand up and behave like a repeater for short-range use in emergency communications. So I got an Argent Data Systems SR1, which this is technically a simplex repeater box. Do some research. You're going to hear a lot of people that have an opinion about these things. A lot of people don't care for them or like them, call them all sorts of things. But I'm going to tell you that Argent Data Systems has built a really, really capable little box, and it does exactly what it's supposed to do very well. So what I did was I had some help from a friend to build a crossover cable to go between this and the microphone port of the KG1000G Plus. And the way this box works is that whenever the radio keys up and receives a message, it stores it, and then once the message is finished, it keys the radio back up and plays the message back. It works like a parrot. So this is why it's called a simplex repeater box, or simplex repeater voice repeater, because what it does is ostensibly you would set it to a single channel, it'll receive, it'll repeat back. And that doesn't sound extremely helpful for a communications perspective. It's good for testing. But for communications, that doesn't sound that useful because you're still playing on one frequency, which means in common use, it can extend the range of a bunch of HTs, because if you only have 1 mile of range with an HT from wherever you are to this Manpack, then when this thing rebroadcasts, it can spread that message that far in all directions from itself. So in that respect, it does act like a repeater. But the problem is if you're close enough to hear the originator of the message, you're going to hear them talk, then you're going to hear this thing talk back. And it really does, it makes this a less than optimal solution, except for what I figured out. And it might just be with the KG1000G Plus and this put together. But what I was able to do was I was able to put side B in VFO in frequency mode and set that to 467 megahertz, which is again the input repeater frequency. It's the output if you're transmitting on repeater frequencies, but the repeater itself should be taking in a message at 467. And then I set the other side of the radio, side A, to, I think it was, at the time it was GMRS 15. It was 5 megahertz down from that 467 megahertz incoming frequency. I set the radio to transmit on 462. It was listening on 467. I turned the volume up at 467 and all the way down to 0 on 462. And then I connected this. And what happened was I was able to take a standard GMRS HT. I was able to set it to a repeater frequency, no fooling around with the radio, just set it and forget it. And I was able to talk to this Manpack and have it repeated back to me, taking in the message 467, putting it back out at 462, and it worked just like a standard duplex repeater. So one thing I noticed as I was editing this that I forgot to slip in at this moment in the video, and I wanted to just preempt that one know-it-all who's going to jump in the comments and say, this is not really a duplex repeater. Kind of, sort of. So let me explain. Traditional duplex repeaters, whether we're talking about GMRS or ham, they receive and transmit on two separate frequencies simultaneously. And that's kind of the secret sauce that makes repeaters a little bit nicer to use than what I've built. In the fact that, like, what I built, you transmit, you have to wait till that same transmission's put back out, and then the next person in the conversation has to transmit and wait for it to come back out. So what this does is it makes every conversation take twice as long, and it now means things like, if someone's going to sit there and have a 5-minute long rag chewing session, this radio is going to get very unhappy very quickly because that's going to really bog down the conversation. It's really meant more for, I need to extend the range of my handheld. I need to get a short, call it a short, important message into the repeater and back out so that everybody around me can hear it. What this radio system does with the Argent Data Systems SR1 and this radio, the way I've set it up, is that it receives a message, it parrots it back, but it does do it on two separate frequencies. So it's not technically a duplex repeater, but it's not really a simplex repeater either, the way I have it set up. It really is more built to kind of be the middle ground between the two. And the reasons I didn't build a real or regular duplex repeater was because I would need a second radio and a duplexer and either run both radios off the same battery or run two separate batteries. To maintain Manpack form factor and just reasonable weight, there was no way on earth I was going to surrender to the idea that I had to run a duplexer, which cuts your power output by 30 to 40%, it seems like in my research, on top of the fact that I was going to have to suffer double the weight of the system. And even if I ran both radios off the same battery, I mean, that wouldn't be dramatically different than running one radio in receive and transmit. But the real hitch was going to be the additional cost, the additional weight, the additional power sapping of the duplexer. That was what was really going to push this, and the extra radio. All that was going to push this to a level of complexity that I don't think most people would be willing to tolerate. And again, the whole idea behind giving this thing repeater capabilities, it's not meant to like stand up in the yard and be a duplex repeater so that you can be one of the cool guys in GMRS and talk to people all around you. It was more the idea that, it's the day after Hurricane Ida, which is something that is very near and dear to my heart because it flattened my family a couple of years ago. The cell phones are out, we have no comms, and we had HTs, but the range on those could be a little limited. So by having this in play, if we were pushing the range of those HTs, we would be able to flip over to the repeater channel when there wasn't another method of communication and be able to talk back and forth over more extended ranges. So that's the explanation I need to drop in right here. It's not a duplex repeater, it's not a simplex repeater, it's some kind of radio nerd thing, but that's the explanation. Now, I hear my message come back to me, but anybody else who happens to be on frequency will only ever hear it once because they're not listening to 467, they're only listening to 462. That allowed all of this mess, to work together and to behave like a duplex repeater. I don't have to use CTSS tones or DTS tones. to filter anything out, I can literally just stand this up and have this behave like a duplex repeater for mid-range use for an off-grid communication situation. I plan to bring this thing to prepper camp where I know there's some other GMRS users and we're all going to, play with it and test it and see how it behaves. But I wanted to try to show you the net result of a whole bunch of radio junk. The whole point of doing this was that I wanted to build something that I can put into a bag, I can deploy it out of the back of a truck, and I can have a Manpack radio capabilities with the addition of multiple power options, multiple antenna options, a repeater option. I wanted to build the one radio that would really be kind of a centerpiece to this whole GMRS plan that I've put together. And I've tried to build this in such a way that, it's not outside the technical abilities of the average person. It really just comes down to, do you need 50 watts transmitting power? Do you want to try to deal with the complexity of integrating even simplex repeater capabilities? Is it enough just to have a couple of HTs and maybe a smaller mobile on a smaller battery and not have it in this form factor where it's more portable, but it does a lot of the same things? And those are questions only you can answer. But I'm hoping that by doing a quick little video on this and showing this to y'all, I can at least get y'all thinking about, is this something you'd be interested in trying to emulate or something like this? And if the answer is yes, you're welcome to reach out to me and I'll tell you everything I learned the hard way throughout doing this, because there's just not a lot of content out there about GMRS Manpacks for a lot of really good reasons that I am happy to admit. But for my purposes, GMRS is going to be the radio service that suits me and my family the best. And this gave me the capabilities I was after in this form factor for this radio service. So I'm not going to let this turn into a 45-minute long video because y'all don't want to watch it and I don't want to edit it. But I did want to have a little bit of a closer look at what a GMRS Manpack looks like. This is it outside of the bag, because inside the bag it just looks like a radio faceplate in a bag. But these are the guts involved. So leave me a comment. Welcome to come find me on social media if you have questions about it. You want to know anything more specific to this, I'd be happy to it. I mean, there's nothing about this that's trade secrets. It was a little bit of researching on the internet and some general knowledge of how to build things and how to assemble things and how to do electrical wiring. Nothing really complicated. But come catch a Matter of Facts podcast sometime. We talk about this kind of stuff, about preparedness and off-grid communications and survival and things that range all the way from the catastrophic, things like Hurricane Katrina, things like, severe weather events, all the way down to the really mundane stuff, which is my tire blew out and I had to fix it on the side of the road. Like, all that stuff's preparedness, all that stuff is self-reliance. It's just a question of, how bad is your day today? But come check us out, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye, guys.